There you go. Okay, welcome everyone. I hope you've all had a chance to get some food. If you haven't gotten food, please come and get some a little bit of lunch we have over here for you. Glad to see you all today. My name is Nate Olson. I'm the interim director of the Kegley Institute of Ethics. I'm honored for the Kegley Institute to be hosting today's important conversation about CSUB's identity as a Hispanic serving institution. Almost 70% of CSUB's student body identifies Hispanic or Latinx, a percentage that makes CSUB an HSI by default. As we'll hear from our panelists, a university is an HSI if its student population is at least 25% Hispanic, Latinx, and we're far above that. But today's conversation is not about what makes CSUB an HSI by default. It's about what makes us our identity as an HSI, how we make being an HSI part of our identity at CSUB, how we serve and intentionally serve Latino, Latinx students. A topic now during Latinx Heritage Month, but a topic for our campus throughout the year. I'm thrilled to have Dr. Joseph Flores serving as our fall programming fellow for the Kegley Institute of Ethics. This event is really due to him. He organized this event and will serve as its moderator. So I think we should start with a big thank you to Dr. Flores. Before I turn it over to him, I want to say thank you to the Office of Equity, Inclusion, and Compliance, helped provide lunch for you all today. To the Office of the Provost, thank you, Provost Rodriguez, who is here as well. The Kegley family, Valley Strong Credit Union for additional support. So let's give them all a round of applause too. This event is, so I want to welcome the people joining us on the live stream for today's event. It's also being recorded. So if you know someone who wasn't able to be here live today, we're going to post this on our Kegley Institute of Ethics YouTube page in the next couple of days so they can go and see the conversation there. You also, when you came in, you should have gotten a little piece of paper like this. On this, you'll see there's a QR code on there. If you go to the QR code on this, use your phone to get there. It's a chance for you to enter questions at any point in today's event. We'll be looking at those questions and we'll take them. Actually, it'll inform some of what our panelists say when we get to them too. But at any point during the event, you can enter questions there. When we get to the Q&A portion later in the event, it'll be around 1. We'll also take questions here at the microphone. I understand some people, we have students who are very diligent, making sure they get to class. Some of you have class at 1. So we're also going to take a break at 12:45, 12:50, a 5-minute break for those of you that need to depart at that time. So we will have a short break before we get to the Q&A portion of the event. Let me make sure I'm not forgetting anything else. On Zoom, if you want to enter questions, we're putting the link to enter questions now. We should have that now in the chat. So at any point during the event, if you're on the live stream, you can also enter questions on there. Okay, so let me introduce Dr. Flores. Dr. Flores is Assistant Professor of Religious Studies at CSUB. He holds a PhD from the University of Cambridge. His research focuses on the intersection of religious experience and everyday life among Latinx and Latin American communities, particularly in the manifold ways religious thought and practice are inflected by issues of violence, oppression, and marginalization. Dr. Flores published the book, Pentecostalism, Lived Religion and Social Activism in Authoritarian Chile, Giving Life to the Faith in 2021, and has authored articles on memory studies and Pentecostal worldviews, as well as evangelical social thought in Latin America. He served as CSUB's first Hispanic Serving Institution Fellow in the 2023-24 academic year, and this event is partly building on the work that he did as an HSI faculty fellow during the last academic year for CSUB. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Flores.
Testing, okay. Thank you, Dr. Olson, for that introduction. I just want to start off by saying that this was really a collaborative event with the people sitting next to me. We had several meetings about how to authentically present the information and conversation that we're going to have about CSUB's identity as an HSI, both in the past and going into the future. It's my pleasure to introduce my colleagues just to the left of me. I'm going to introduce them one by one, but if we can hold our applause until the very end. We have Dr. Nora Cisneros right next to me. She is an assistant professor of ethnic studies here at CSUB. Born in Durango, Mexico, and raised in Inglewood, California. Dr. Cisneros is a proud immigrant and former first-generation college student. That's a theme that will run through this panel, I think. She earned her BA in psychology, an MA and PhD in social sciences and education with a specialization in ethnic studies from the University of California, Los Angeles. Her scholarship draws from Chicana feminist studies and critical race studies to investigate educational inequities, Latinx educational pathways, girls of color literacies, anti-carceral activism, and abolitionist pedagogies. Her scholarship has been featured in various peer-reviewed journals, such as the Journal of Educational Foundations and Feminist Formations, among others. And I think this next piece of information would deserve a round of applause. She is the co-editor of the recently, this year, published book, Like a Path in the Tall Grasses, Race and Refusal in Higher Education. And I think that deserves next to Dr. Cisneros is Dr. Tomas Martinez. In his 40th year at CSUB and a 4-time department chair, he also teaches leadership and organizational change. He holds a PhD in public policy from USC and an MA in Mexican American graduate studies from San Jose State University. He has served in the past under President Tomas Arcienega for 10 years as assistant to the president for diversity initiatives and special projects, including preparation of CSUB's original HSI certification, serving 12 years as a consultant to the Hispanic Association of Colleges and Universities, or HACU. and has also been involved in the preparation of $10 million in grants, including CSUB's Title III Institutional Development Grant, CAMP, HEP, and the Migrant Scholars Program. Next to Dr. Tomas Martinez is Dr. William Flores. Dr. Flores is Director of Graduate Studies and the Chair of the Department of Modern Languages and Literatures, as well as Director of the Institute of Literacy and Community Engagement. He has 24 years of experience in higher education, administration, as well as on the faculty side. 12 of those years, he served as a senior minister of a bilingual religious organization in Riverside, California, working closely with Chicanx and Latinx population. His research interests include 20th and 21st century Latin American literature, decolonial theory, and indigeneity. In addition to foreign language pedagogy and teaching, and the teaching of Spanish for the professions. His scholarly work includes research published in Hispania, Lexington Books, the National University of San Marcos Press, Humanidades, Revista Internacional de Humanidades, and is that French? Which my French might be a little bit rusty, and Oxford University Press. And finally, we have Claudia Catota. She is the Chief Diversity Officer and Special Assistant to the President here at CSUB. She serves on the President's Cabinet and provides strategic direction to diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, with particular attention to the university's policies, practices, and structure. She oversees the Division of Equity, Inclusion, and Compliance, which also includes Title IX, tribal relations, sexual-based violence, prevention efforts. She has also been successful in receiving $900,000 in federal, state, and CSU grant funding to support the division's goals. Claudia is most proud of her work in leading the university efforts and working closely with students to establish the CSUB Dreamer Resource Center to support undocumented and mixed status campus members. In 2016, the students selected Claudia as the inaugural recipient of the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Unity Award, which is given to a faculty or staff member dedicated to promoting unity, civility, inclusion, and diversity on CSUB's campus. Claudia is the first in her family to graduate from college. She received a BA in African American Studies from UCLA, an MA in Latin American Studies from Cal State LA, and a Juris Doctorate from the University of Wisconsin Law School, and is currently a doctoral candidate at the Johns Hopkins University School of Education. Claudia was born and raised in Los Angeles and is the proud daughter of Salvadoran immigrants. If you can join me in giving this very esteemed panel a round of applause. To begin our conversation today, I want to just frame a little bit of our discussion with a few details about why this discussion is so important to our campus. And it's intended to start the conversation to move us simply beyond the statistics, to think about what it means to be an HSI on the ground, in the classroom, in the activities that we all participate. And then I will turn it over to the panelists for a few questions. So just as a general context, the Hispanic or Latinx population in the United States, and particularly in higher education, is the only one that is growing. Hispanic enrollment, as you can see in this first point on the screen, is expected to exceed 4 million students by 2026. And this is far surpassing the rates of any other racial ethnic group in this country by more than 10%. In Kern County, and I pulled the most recent U.S. Census data for what was available, Hispanic residents account for over 50% of the population of this county, which is higher than California as a whole. And Kern County represents the 6th largest Hispanic population in the country, where 45% of households in this county also speak a language other than English. As Dr. Olson mentioned in his introduction, The university is approximately 70% Hispanic, and that is one of the highest demographics in all of the CSU system. Only CSU LA and Dominguez Hills have higher percentages of Hispanic students. And so when I started talking with Dr. Olson about what kind of event I would like to organize, this immediately came to mind. What are we doing as an institution? And we're doing a lot, but there's always room for improvement. And I think as we look forward into the coming years, we are going to be examining and thinking even harder about what it means to authentically serve this very important and growing part of our student body. And with that, I think, I'm tired of talking, so I would love to hear what the panelists have. I just want to start off with some very basic questions about HSIs. And a few of our panelists have also have a lot of institutional knowledge, which is important to begin where we come from. We need to know that before we can really begin talking about where we're going. And so my question to open this conversation is really for our audience. If any of the panelists can talk about what is an HSI and what does it take to become an HSI?
Yeah, it is. Thank you, Rich. So hi, everyone, good morning. So Hispanic Serving Institution means that an institution of higher education has at least a 25%, what the Department of Ed calls Hispanic student enrollment, and it has to be a full-time equivalent of a student population, at least 25%. The other piece that's usually not talked about is that a university has to have at least a predominantly population of students that receive financial aid assistance. So Pell Grants or any type of other type of financial aid that has to do with your socioeconomic status. So a lot of the criticisms around why institutions get an HSI designation is not necessarily because schools are actually wanting to become Hispanic serving institutions, but because it's actually based on a demographic shift in the local areas. So in the case of Cal State Bakersfield, we've seen about bless you, Dr. Sadaraka. We've seen about 20% increase in Latinx student enrollment in about 10 years. So it really says a lot about our current demographics in the county, in the state. The state of California has about, I want to say 75, if not more than that, Hispanic serving institutions, federally designated universities and colleges. And it enrolls about, HSIs account for about 80% of the total student enrollment population in the state of California. So it's really important for universities, I think, to recognize what it means to be a Hispanic serving institution, why they're becoming a Hispanic serving institution, and what that means for the campus.
Thank you, Claudia. The next question I have for this panel is really about CSUB's history as an HSI. How did it come about, and why was it a priority for the institution?
Particularly interested in students, but I want you guys to know that I've seen every one of your faces. It blows my mind. I don't think you guys are doing. I'm going to give you the microphone for the people on Zoom. Okay, sorry. Okay, if you look at that real quick, I'll just give you a quick number, just to let you know why this blows my mind to see you guys here. Look at the enrollment in 1983 when I arrived. I know I was like about 12 years old, but when I arrived here, the Latino student population alone was only 11.4%. Today, it's almost 68%. Yeah. And to me, it's not just the Latino population, but the entire diversity of this campus. It just blows my mind, because if I would have when I began teaching here about 1983, when President Ortega arrived, we arrived at the same time. I didn't know who he was. You know, I was just a young moco, so he didn't know who this kid was. But I was out doing my stuff, teaching classes. But if I went into a room and there was 30 students like this, there would probably be 3 Latinos, 1 African-American, and 1 Asian on average. That's all there was. So this was not the place that you guys see today. So when I see you guys' faces, the diversity of this room, the diversity of the students, I begin right there telling you, it blows my mind, and for the positive. So anyway, oh, and then, okay, then you leave it there, but the other data up there was that in addition to being 68% Latino, 45% of the campus, over 45%, are Latinas, are female. So that's, Latinas are the plurality of this campus, meaning that there's more Latinas than there are of anything else on the campus. And in that sense, be aware very clearly, the future of higher ed, the future of our community is Latina. You guys are the ones who are carrying the ball for us, and are going to for a long time. The majority of our students are all also first generation. But just real quick, to put all this in context, go ahead. You need to know where we live. We live in the San Joaquin Valley in Kern County, and this is a different place. You know, if people don't understand that, a lot of our faculty, or our newer faculty, they come in from the outside. Even some of them maybe sometimes don't fully understand where you are today. When you come to the San Joaquin Valley, people say, oh, we're in California. We have people that came from other states, and they go, oh, I'm going to move to California. I'll be near the beach, have fun, hang out in the San Francisco and SoCal. It's going to be a lot of fun. Then they come to Bakersfield, they go, okay, this is not what I thought. Because you need to know that the San Joaquin Valley has been described in different ways. One research agency refers to the San Joaquin Valley as a third world nation within the Golden State. Within California, we are different than the rest of California. Another research center said that the only way to understand the San Joaquin Valley is that it's the only thing analogous to it in terms of socioeconomic factors, income, poverty, educational attainment, all that. The only comparison is with Central Appalachia. Some of you may not know what that means, but I think everybody on that side knows what I'm talking about. That to understand the San Joaquin Valley, we are among the poorest sections of the country is right here. And I don't know that everybody understands that, but you need to understand that that's where we began, or we begin, because this area has historically always had the lowest attainment rates and a lot of things, but educational attainment has always been an issue for all segments of our community. Whites, blacks, Latinos, all of those groups are underperform in relation to the rest of the state. You have something in front of you there. It says that in terms of California, getting too old, guys. California, Kern County, just 25 years ago, only had 33.5% the students were college going. College going means that, and you guys are more than college going. College going means that you ever enrolled in a college, whether it was a community college or a 4-year, and you registered and you walked in the door. That's all. You guys are beyond that. You more than walked in the door. You are still here. And I don't know what year you are, but anyway, but that's unusual in relation to California. California is much higher than that, 43%. And then, currently we're 43% Kern County. We've gone up in 25 years. And with California as a whole is 62% if you look at the data up there. Anyway, in addition, you need to understand where we are is that this is educational attainment information for all adults. This is not Latino, all adults. High school graduates, California, 84, over 84%. Kern County, only 77%. East Bakersfield, you know, it's the census area, East Bakersfield. Mostly, some of you know zip code 9305. Anybody live in 9305? Anybody here? 9305 is probably the poorest zip code well, definitely in Kern County, but among all the counties among all the zip codes in California. But in 9305, well, actually East Bakersfield as a whole, high school graduation only 29%. Lamont, 38%. Now it starts to get worse. Bachelor's degree, California, over 36%. Kern County, only over 18%. East Bakersfield, 1.4%. Only 1.4, just more than one adult out of every 100 has ever achieved a bachelor's degree. You guys are on track to increase that number, I hope. But you need to know that you're in a very, very small group. So in that sense, why you blow my mind, because you guys are the ones who are improving our situation, our data. Okay, graduates, this is all adults, because I'm not just Latinos. Graduate school, California-wide, 14% of the population that earns a master's degree. Kern County, only 6.5%. Back to East Bakersfield, 0.4%. Lamont, 0.6%. So East Bakersfield, Lamont, only half of 1% of adults have ever achieved a master's degree. So that's why I say when you guys being there, it's incredible in terms of what's going on. But across the state, Kern County has always had among the lowest college eligibility, college going, and educational attainment rates. In addition, you need to know that California has been changing rapidly in terms of age and ethnic makeup. And part of that is that because of that, education institutions, whether they be elementary, high school, college, have struggled to figure out how to change and respond to this new population. Okay, I'm going to be here. They mentioned that I worked for a previous president here for about 10 years, President Tomas Arciniega. He's still alive. He's almost 90 years old. I spoke to him about a month ago. I told him what I was going to be doing. But anyway, you need to know, if you're trying to understand what's happening at Cal State Bakersfield and how it happened and why it happened, you cannot understand it without understanding this man. You need to know who he was. President Arciniega arrived to this campus. The campus opened up in 1970. In 1970, it wasn't even CSUB. There was no U. It was just Cal State Bakersfield. It was not university yet. He did that. He made a change. He led that to make that happen. But when the campus opened in 1970, it was a brand new campus. Faculty, they're good people. They come from all over the place. Our faculty, I always say, you guys are like migrant labor. You go wherever the work is, right? Whatever the university is, you're going to go there. So when they come here, they want to be the best biologists they can be. They want to be the best psychologists. They can be whatever their discipline. They want to be the best at what they do. And that's pretty much what they focus on. The idea that, oh, we're going to come to Bakersfield, this is so cool, is now it's not part of it. They want to be the best at what they do, which is good. Now, on the downside, then in terms of what the university is doing as a mission overall, in terms of administration and leadership, is the different issue. When the campus opened, the thought was that this was going to be a small liberal arts college. Liberal arts college means not a lot of professional programs. We're not going to worry about that kind of stuff. And I say insular, meaning they weren't real concerned about the community out there. There's a fact in a certain sense, I used to say that the Cal State Bakersfield did all it could to pretend that it was not in Bakersfield. But it was just a small, our enrollment at that time when I arrived was under 3,000. And most of the people were fine with that. The administration and faculty, okay, that's fine. Now, I will say that there was, when the president arrived, he looked at the numbers and he said, the demographics are changing. And the region has great educational need. We must change our mission, our vision. We must redirect ourselves and look that way. Look into the valley. That's our population, and we must serve them. And he set out to do everything that he thought was necessary to make that happen. I'm going to say, without spending a lot of time on it, not everybody was happy about that. A lot of the original faculty, like I say, most faculty just arrived, they just want to be good at what they do. They're not concerned about mission and all that. They're concerned about their field, which is good, fine. But all it takes is a small group, 10 or 12, faculty who view themselves as the leadership and who view themselves saying, hey, we founded this campus. You can't change it. We like it just the way it is. So there was great resistance. I won't spend a lot of time on it. A lot of things I could share about that. But he was here for 21 years, President Arciniega. And they resisted him for every one of those 21 years. Some of you were here. You guys remember that. But he was resisted. That's why when I see all the stuff that's going on today that seems natural, I'm like, my God, the world changed on us. And people today don't even realize how it happened or what happened. But in terms of who Dr. Arciniega is, what you need to know is that we're talking about HSI today, Hispanic Serving Institution. That's our new designation that we're talking about. When Dr. Arciniega arrived in 1983, there was no such thing as HSI. HSI was created advocated for by a group called HACU, Hispanic Association of Colleges and Universities. They came together in 1986, university presidents, Latino presidents, and they pushed for the designation HSI, which became, I think it went into effect federally, I think in 1996. But in 1983, there was nothing. He arrived and he helped found the Hispanic HACU, Hispanic Association of College and University, nationwide. He worked with Latino presidents across the country to create an organization. He fought and worked with them to create the HSI designation. And his leadership, as I will say, I describe him as being the padrino of all Latino presidents in the country. He was at the forefront. He was the first Latino president in the Cal State system, the first vice president in the Cal State system. And he was here at a time when none of the stuff we talk about today existed. So you need to know that part. So the only last part on that is he shifted us from what was called the liberal arts to what's called a regional comprehensive university, that we're going to grow and build new programs, academic programs, and student service programs so that we could serve this population. In that sense, then he began to create and push for all the things that we see today. He said we need to create student service programs. Jasmine is now running the Dreamers Resource Center. And we now have programs like that which did not exist. Back then, he said, go out. I worked with him. I will not claim that I said, oh, I did this, I did that. I did what he told me to do. And in that, he said, we need money for migrant students. Go get a camp grant. So I did what he told me. I went out and wrote the camp grant. He said, we have high school equivalency, but people who do not have the high school degree, we need to figure out how to get them here. He said, go out to the HEP program. I wrote that grant. We got HEP. He said, we need scholarship programs. And he explained how it was going to happen. We did that. He said, we need a migrant scholars program. We did something called Title III. And I'm trying to tell you that today we talk about HSI Title V. There was no Title V. There was only something called Title III. But we went after Title III, which was for small campuses to build up their institution. So we did all those number of things. And he led all that. So the only thing then I'm going to try to tie it up is that he changed the mission and the vision of this university. So the kind of stuff that you guys see here today, programs and the diversity of the students and of the faculty and staff. You look at it and you say, what? Boy, Cal State is kind of always been that way. It was not always that way. 40 years ago, none of this was going on. So the stuff we're going to talk about today is where we're at today and where do we take it from here. There's much to be done. And on that, we have to continue to make our programs more accessible and responsive to the needs of all the students in the region and of all the students on the campus. And in a certain way, we have to keep in mind, especially, as I'll say, staff and faculty, that we really are, in my mind, obligation is to continue the transformation of the campus in the sense of being change agents. You're here to help continue what started 40 years ago so that we continue to reach out and serve all the different students for this region. The only thing I'll leave you with is that some of you, a bunch of people over here, they were in the last couple of weeks involved with a lot of work from the farm workers, from the UFW. So I was with them. So just on that note, I'm going to remind them that in my mind, what you guys really are is you guys are community organizers but working in the fields of higher ed. That's your job, to be a community organizer in this educational area. But with that, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Martinez, for sharing your experiences at the university. I think it is very important that we understand the past in order to keep moving forward with these discussions. We have a few minutes before we're going to take the break, but I want to transition into some questions about HSIs in general and where we as a university sit in relation to those questions. Specifically, I'd like the panel to talk a little bit about the fact, and Claudia mentioned this much earlier, that many universities achieve HSI status by default. There are demographic shifts in their communities. And running alongside that is the very real fact that there is no federal requirement in terms of practices, services that are delivered to students at those universities. There's no requirement for internal institutional infrastructure as for being an HSI. And I want to ask the committee why that's problematic, but I think this ties into this bigger question of what does it mean to authentically serve Latinx, Hispanic, Latini students. And we can talk about that from an institutional perspective, an instructional, supportive perspective as well. And so I'll turn it over to my colleagues here to do that. I should have done this before. If you haven't, feel free to leave questions in the Padlet using that QR, thank you, code as if they come up as my colleagues discuss this.
Ready? Okay. Thank you. So I think to think about authentic servingness, Latinos, we want to, again, be mindful that Latino students and populations are not a monolithic group. There is no one single Latino student, right? And so I think that universities need to be more intentional because, again, by default, demographic shifts, that is happening. But I am glad to see that more Hispanic serving institutions, whether established or emerging, are actually being more intentional in their planning. And that's partly due because they're recognizing the self-interest in that, but also because you need to access funds, right? So there's grants, funding that's available, but that requires a lot of data, that requires a lot of proving that you're actually serving students. So I think that's good. And again, Latinos are not a monolithic group. So I think that most HSIs take a localized approach, right? Because in order to serve students, what are the needs? So data is important to authentically serve. And I do see that happening at CSUB or at various stages of it. And to be candid, all HSIs, established or even those emerging, I think are on their own growth journey, meaning that we're sometimes on a struggle bus to really know how to identify the needs of students. But I do want to offer that I see that, and again, I've only been here a year, but I do see that CSUB, every educator that I've met here has the best intentions and wants to serve students. And I think most understand that we want to be inclusive. When we mean Latinos, we know that we have undocumented students, we know that we have refugee students, we know we have Centroamericanos, Afro-Latinx. And to be inclusive means being aware of that and putting that at the forefront. And I think that's where programs, and especially the retention of Latino faculty, the emergence and upholding of ethnic studies, that's what we do in ethnic studies. So it's a plug-in for my faculty and my fellow faculty colleagues and my classes, but that's part of what makes, what I think can help better serve HSIs is to ensure that we have a Latino studies degree, a Chicanic studies degree, that we have the faculty to teach that, faculty that share the experiences of students to a certain degree. So I think to authentically serve is localized, data-driven, and really grounded in ethnic studies and that kind of really culturally relevant and authentic teaching.
So my doctoral dissertation at Johns Hopkins is focused on really critiquing Hispanic serving institutions. So what I've seen, at least in my research, and I think my experience here at CSUB is that we're growing as an institution in terms of our Latino, Latinx, Latin student enrollment, but what exactly are we doing in order to support students throughout their academic journey to make sure they graduate? And most importantly, I think what I'm hearing now from students that are graduating is, what is my career placement? Like, where am I gonna get that job? So, you know, I have a privilege of working with Ludi Magaña Ortega in our office, and we were talking about a student recently who graduated, has a phenomenal degree from CSUB, and is now back and working with her parents in the fields. So what does that say about us? Where have we failed that student in that process? I think one of the things too is that we're giving this designation, I think is, again, asking ourselves, what does it mean to be a successful Hispanic serving institution? It means looking at data, as Dr. Cisneros said. It means following students in their career, in their academic career, but also making sure that students have a job upon graduation. One of the things I'm going to critique my own institution, which is UCLA. UCLA and Berkeley right now are being very aggressive in going after their Hispanic Serving Institution designation. And it's not necessarily because all of a sudden UCLA wants to be very Latino friendly. I think it's because there's millions and millions of dollars available for institutions to get grants. And so right now, Dr. Martinez mentioned the Hispanic Association of Colleges and Universities. What we're seeing is HACU being very strategic about engaging with these top research institutions. And so recently at the Unidos conference in Las Vegas, I had an opportunity to meet with representatives from the White House for Hispanic Inclusive Excellence. And they're getting ready to form a Hispanic Serving Institution advisory board for the president. There's a White House Hispanic Serving Institution. So why is it all of a sudden now it's a priority for the White House, right? So we need to ask ourselves questions like, why is all of this happening? I think we also talked about to the advisory board for the White House is, what does that mean for smaller schools like the Cal States, other institutions that are not research intensive? What does that mean in terms of giving us access to funding that we do need to support students at a smaller institution? Our budget is minor compared to a department or perhaps at UCLA. And so we really need this funding to make a lot of our work successful. So how is that going to impact smaller campuses? So I think I have more critiques than I do about this designation, but I'll turn it over to my colleagues.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Claudia. This is very, very helpful. I believe that to authentically serve Hispanic, Latine students, we need to have a holistic approach to the needs, not only of the students, but also of their community. Many of us come from Latine communities. We understand the struggle. We understand the difficulties that the families have. Many of the families have a linguistic barrier, cultural barrier. And precisely to address these needs, I founded the Institute of Literacy and Community Engagement. Thank you so much, Dr. Flores. So this Institute of Literacy and Community Engagement the purpose of it is precisely in a practical way to address these needs, to serve the community, to care for these barriers that are cultural, linguistic, and be able to assist the students. So one of these things that we do in the Institute is translation of campus materials to Spanish. Many of in the community don't understand the nuances, the difficulties, and the differences that happen in the university. I was talking to some parents the other day, and what they were telling me is, I want my child to get to work. I don't need him to go to college. Why go to college? He already graduated from high school. Get to work, help pay the bills. And it's understandable because there is a culture in there. But by translating these documents, by helping them understand, and I have been also doing college readiness classes for parents of elementary and high school students, so they can understand that, hey, there is financial aid. In the long term, it's more beneficial for the students if they can come to college, get a career, instead of just an hourly salary, they can get an actual salary. So I explained that to the parents. I help them understand that with financial aid, yes, the child can help support the bills. I mean, perhaps not to the same extent, but they will be able to help. They will be able to care for some needs, and in the long term, they are able to have more benefit. So to really have this holistic approach, I think we need to address the community, not just the student, but also the student and the community, and go beyond to care for these linguistic and cultural barriers and serve our Hispanic and Latine students. Let me share another example, if I may. Yes.
I just want to be respectful of take a break so students can make their way to classes. But I think that this is the perfect segue into what will become our next question. So we'll start off with Dr. Flores in about
Sounds
5
good.
minutes. Yes.
Thank you.
What did you learn there? What's on the mind? We're not leaving.
Okay, everyone, I think we'll take a seat.
Yeah. There you go. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, everyone. Let's go ahead and get started. You can take a seat.
Oh, the white women.
Good, as they should have.
Okay, so let's go ahead and move back into discussion. I want to pick up where we left off. I know quite a few students had to go to class, and we appreciate everyone sticking around. The rest of this will be a bit more conversational, and then we're going to open it up for questions and answer, or questions, a Q&A session. So I want to turn back to Dr. Flores and pick up with his statements about authentically serving our students as an HSI.
Sounds good. Well, thank you. And I know we also have some of our students are joining us online. So I'm very, very glad to be able to speak about this and just to talk about how we can better serve and what does it mean to serve our students and the Hispanic, as a Hispanic serving institution. So let me share another example of serving Hispanic Latinx students. This semester, as you can see in the screen, we launched the institute. We launched also English as a second language classes for parents of school children and high schoolers. As soon as we have 3 cohorts of these classes, as soon as we launch them, the wait list is as large as the class. This is the demand well, the classes are free, but that's a huge demand. What are we doing with that? We're serving the community. We're helping the parents. We're helping them help their children. And we're breaking linguistic and cultural barriers. In these classes, we don't just teach English. I go to the classes and I speak to the parents in their language about college readiness, how to prepare the children to get to college, what classes to take. Many of them, well, you gotta see, that's good enough. But it's not like that. And those cultural barriers need to be broken. What does it mean? How does that affect financial aid? So those things are important to be able to really influence and help and serve the students and the community. So those are some of the things that we have been doing with the Institute of Literacy and Community Engagement, college readiness classes, a runner day, for example. I often encounter parents that they don't speak English, and I encounter them, and one of them asks, what is a double major? And the reason why they ask this question is because in many of their countries, and so that we can understand the culture, to do a second major, you have to go 4 more years of college. Not just a semester or just using your electives for a second major. So I explained that to them in their language and breaking that notion so that we can better benefit and serve the students. Many of the students, they can just use their electives to do this second major or do an extra semester or an extra year. But to explain this is important so that we can provide a better service. One of them asked me, my child is majoring in Spanish or majoring in English. He already knows Spanish. Why do that? Or he'll learn English watching cartoons. And these notions need to be broken. So I explained to them that this is for a career as a teacher or a career as an editor, interpreter, or other professions. So this is just a couple of examples where we are serving and we can provide better service to the students and to the community as a Hispanic serving institution. I would like to add that from an instructional point, to serve Latine students means caring coaching. caring coaching, helping them so that they can fulfill their goals, so they can reach their success. We mentor them here as a student, but also after they graduate. Many of them identify with us. We understand their language, we understand their culture. So we can talk to them and help them as they are building a career, as they're looking for work. So this is a holistic approach that I believe it could be and can be strongly developed as an HSI. They feel the connection with our department. We understand their language. We understand their culture, and they also learn about other cultures and to become more globally minded and as they continue in society. So building a sense of belonging and recognizing the importance of collaboration. We have also in my department have been very active with the Spanish Club and Spanish Honor Society. Why? Because we want to reach the families too and the students. We want to develop this sense of belonging, and we have been very successful with that. With the Honor Society, we have ceremonies in which we bring the parents, we bring the children, we bring the tío, the uncle, and the whole family. Why? Because we want them also to sense that they belong here, that this is for their family, and we're here to support them. So those are just some of the ways we can authentically serve the students and the community. I can attest that the Department of Modern Languages and Literatures has been very involved for years in bringing students and families to these events and to foment this welcome, inclusive environment. And I'm gonna let my colleagues also take a word on this.
Thank you, Dr. Flores. I think, as I was thinking about authenticity, I was also thinking about Dr. Yoso's work around cultural wealth, community cultural wealth, and really playing into the assets, right, that our Latino, Latinx students bring to the campus. I think I've often heard some folks on our campus say like, well, students are not prepared enough. They're not ready to be here, right? They probably shouldn't be here. They're not ready for college, but let's flip it, right? Like, what are some of the assets that our Latino students have? I think about myself, for example, like I speak two languages. My first language was Spanish, not English. And so what are things that we bring to the institution? We've been focused as a Cal State, focused on what we call the Graduation Initiative GIA 2025, which is really a deep dive into our data. And welcome to the students who just came in. Welcome to the conversation. What does the data tell us about our students in terms of enrollment, retention, persistence rates, and graduation rates? But one of the things I think about authentic servingness, and as a Hispanic Serving Institution specifically, is we really need to understand when we say Latino, Latinx, and Latina, what do we mean, right? We're not all the same. We're obviously, even on the panel, we're not all the same. Our backgrounds are not the same. So really looking at the data, but from an intersectional standpoint, like I want to know are they Central American? Are they Mexicano? Are they South American? We also have a huge Oaxacan population in Lamont and Arvin. Do we also need to think about Latin American students from the perspective of indigeneity? And so there's a lot, and I think it's understanding who our students are. And I think one of the pieces is asking students, what do you all need from us, right? Like we're obviously a little bit older than all of you, right? So we're coming in from a different perspective. So what are things that you need from us to make sure that you feel like you authentically belong here?
Thank you, Claudia, and welcome to the students that just came in. We're having a discussion about what it means to authentically serve our Hispanic students. We are an HSI, a federally recognized university that has more than 25% of the student population identifying as Latinx or Hispanic. In fact, we're 70%. And so we've been building on this discussion, and one of the last questions I want to ask before we move into questions from the audience is really thinking about, and my colleagues have already moved us onto this path, is to thinking about servingness as multidimensional. Dr. Flores mentioned it as holistic, and I think that's a great way to describe it. But how do we serve students not only in the classroom as an institution, student support services, but I think how do we recognize that students are not just students, but people and have experiences and a wealth of knowledge that they're bringing from their experiences onto our campus. We're trying to move away from a deficit-minded definition of what it means to serve our students into thinking about how we can capitalize on all of the identities and the experiences and the knowledge that our students have and build our campus. Not just our campus, but also our community. And so I'd like to ask the panelists, and I'll open this up to everyone, if you have ideas. Dr. Flores mentioned some of the things that Modern Languages and Literature is doing. Perhaps I know there's more actually, because I've worked with him on other projects, but for the other panelists, if you're doing work in your areas or across the university or have some historical knowledge about efforts that have happened in the past, I think it's good for students and faculty and staff to hear those, think about where we've come from, but also where we're going with our identity as an HSI.
So buenas tardes. Welcome to students that just joined us. I'm Dr. Nora Cisneros, a professor of ethnic studies. My emphasis is Latino studies and feminist Chicana studies. So that informs my answer to that question. So I do think, and I'm happy to talk about this with you all in a little bit later on, but I think that one of the things that we want to do, or that I would like to support this university to do, I mentioned it earlier, I'll say it again, we are an inclusive university, and that means acknowledging our students as human beings in social emotional perspectives, but also I think, and this is borrowing from Dr. Gina Garcia's work, a professor at UC Berkeley in education, who's pushed our thinking about HSIs to really think about liberatory outcomes. So not only do we want you to graduate within a certain amount of time, not only do we want you to not have all this crushing debt, not only do we want you to feel welcomed, loved, all of that, right? We want to ensure that students are always connected to this university. We want to reach out when you're in kindergarten, there's no reason that you should be going to an elementary school in Bakersfield and not have a time or a trip, college day here at CSUB. So part of the things that we're doing in ethnic studies and with partnerships with the community is to build those bridges, right? This is your university. And I know that President Harper and other folks, are, including some on this panel, are working very hard and will be working, and please hold us accountable to do this. We should be Bakersfield University, Kern County's university. And that means helping, providing resources, welcoming your primos, your cousins, your siblings, your neighbors to this campus. This is your university. It's a public university, right? Every event should be open to community members. We should always have food, right? We're a food insecure campus oftentimes. Students often have food challenges. Faculty have food insecurity challenges. We're largely a lecture institution. And so thinking about our students and community members holistically from kindergarten all the way even after graduate school. There's no reason that students here should have to leave their communities to attend a grad program or to work professionally. We need us here. We need you here. So I think that's, yeah, absolutely. So I think that's also part of the reason that we do this. And just another shameless plug, I think I'm the only one doing this. Not only is our Department of Ethnic Studies, that's sort of the heart of connecting with students. We're also hosting graduate school pláticas. I'll be hosting October 15th. There's a flyer out there with my cute picture. Come by, we're gonna have food, we're gonna have pláticas and art, and sharing knowledge and sharing that culturally relevant knowledge about how to prepare for grad school, how to pay for grad school, right? Because oftentimes we can't necessarily have these conversations with folks in our families. We should, but we can't always. So this is where your networks are. Oh yeah, take food when you leave because we don't want to throw that away. So again, making sure we're all taking food and sharing it with others. Thank you. Oh.
Along the lines to what my colleague, Dr. Cisneros, was mentioning, I believe that servingness involves serving the students, but also equipping them to serve others and their community, providing them with all the necessary tools so they can effectively provide this service. Many of them go off to become teachers, interpreters, bilingual professionals, and leaders in their community. The idea of servingness is not just as giving, but it's also equipping them so that they can give. For example, in the fields, we can go to the next slide too, if you don't mind, Dr. Flores. So, for example, in the fields of health and human services, which is coming in the slide that I had included, excellent. there's a huge demand for bilingual healthcare professionals. And for example, more than half of Kern County identifies as Latinx, more than half. Almost, and the next slide, almost half of the population of Kern County speaks Spanish at home, almost half. Our communities need culturally competent and bilingual professionals, and we're equipping them, and we need to do more. The same can be said for law enforcement, for education, all the things that can happen when there is a linguistic barrier, when there is a cultural barrier. And we need to address that. And there needs to be, I propose there needs to be a campus-wide effort to be able to better serve the community, breaking these cultural and linguistic barriers. The same can be said for government, journalism, and many other fields. I believe Servingness is equipping students so that they can serve. Another example of Servingness at CSUB is faculty-led study trips. We can go to the, excellent, to the slide that we have there, the previous one with the pictures. Thank you so much, Dr. Flores. So study abroad opportunities so that students can experience other cultures. Our faculty have been leading trips to Costa Rica, Peru, Spain, France, and now we're preparing trips to Mexico, faculty-led study trips. These immersion experiences help Hispanic Latinx students become better equipped to serve not just the community, but the increasingly globalized society in which we live. These are just some ideas along the lines to what Dr. Cisneros was saying.
Thank you. So I've, one of the critiques, right, that I have about our campus, one of the things, so I came to CSUB about 2013, so it's been 11 years. And I have been the only Latina on president's cabinets in 11 years, right? That shouldn't, I don't want to be the first, I don't want to be the last. There should be more, right? There should be more alongside with me, I think 100%. So I also come from ethnic studies. I have my bachelor's and master's in ethnic studies, and I'm a big believer in the power of community and collaborating with community. You want to make sure that your university is being driven by the needs of the community and you're responding to those needs. So one of the things that our previous president, Dr. Lynette Celeste, and I did, we established different affinity advisory councils. So we call them President's Advisory Councils. We have one for Latino Advisory Council that has, we just had a meeting yesterday that I wasn't able to attend, but it brings together faculty and staff from CSUB and meet together with community partners. And the goal is to bring these two entities together to talk about how the university can work better. We have an African American Advisory Council, we have a Native American Advisory Council, and we have a Asian American Pacific Islander Advisory Council. And again, it's community engagement with the campus, specifically around minoritized communities. And that's been successful, I think, for the past 4 years or 5 years since we had them. After Dr. Tomas Martinez left the president's office, I felt like I had to carry on the work that he was doing to make sure that that work didn't die. And so I picked up the Hispanic Association of Colleges and Universities work. So we've been doing delegations of students to the annual conference for the past, I believe, 7 years. So we took one student about 7 years ago, and now we're at 19 students that we're taking to the annual conference. We've also recently established the Cesar Chavez Scholars that will be going to the Capital Forum for Haku. So a goal around these 2 travel scholarships for students is really to offer the opportunity to students to see what's beyond Bakersfield, what's out there, right? What's out there for you. At the Haku Annual Conference, you have the ability to meet with recruiters for jobs, college graduate recruiters. We want you to see what's out there and see what the possibilities are. What other things have we done? We've been working on the Seal of Excelencia through Excelencia in Education, which is a national organization that's focused on highlighting Hispanic serving institutions and what universities can do to better serve Latino students. And we recently just launched the Cesar Chavez Conference. And so a lot of what we're doing now is focus on visibility, right? Just saying, hey, we're here, we're present. But it takes just more than the 5 of us, right? To say we have things to do. It's at all levels. From the faculty that are working with you, to students, to staff. It takes a community, right, to build the different HSI initiatives that we have on campus. I think a lot of what I do on campus I'm a party of one. I have other folks on my team, but they're all dedicated to different responsibilities like Title IX, sexual violence prevention, tribal relations that work together, but also have very distinct responsibilities. And so when I think about my own journey as a first-gen daughter of immigrant parents who predominantly only speak Spanish, it was, a lot of us talk about, we've interpreted for our parents since we were about 5 years old, right? We've done all these things. And so when I think about CSUB, I want to make sure that your families, when I see you, I'm like, oh, that was me. I'm not going to say maybe 30 years ago, right? Coming with my parents to go to college, getting ready to go to college. I want to make sure that this campus is a space where your family, your siblings, your compadres, comadres, whatever, right? Like friends want to come here because you feel like you belong at this university.
Yeah, thank you. And actually, this is great. Can we get a round of applause for all of the panelists? We have about 15 minutes left, and so this is a perfect time for a Q&A. Dr. Olson, I think, has the microphone. Right behind you is...
Thank you, everybody, all the panelists. As some of you know, I've been teaching in Cal State Bakersfield for the last 22 years. And Tomas remembers this. We really needed this kind of visibility that Claudia was talking about. And actually, I have more comments than questions. Maybe you have some questions for me. But my first comment pertains to my colleague, Dr. Nora Cisneros. And it's about, I feel that many times indigenous component, our indigenous cultures and civilizations, they get ignored. They get ignored when we celebrate Latinx culture, which is fine. But like Dr. Cisneros was mentioning, that we need to be conscious of embracing all groups that conform Chicanx and Latinx communities. Many of us come from indigenous families. My family comes from a local native tribe from the Southwest. And in my own classes, I had very many indigenous students, and I always make it a point to really, so those students could share with the rest of the class about their experiences at CSUB as indigenous students. So going along the line, I do believe as a critique, I believe, particularly at CSUB, you know me, I'm straightforward. I do believe that we need to recognize the contributions of Chicanx and Latinx faculty who have been contributing so much for our students, former generations of students, but also the community. I really think that we need to make an effort to really recognize the Chicanx and Latinx faculty. My last comment pertains to my colleague, Dr. Tomas Martinez. Thank you for bringing, remembering the contributions of the first Chicano president, Dr. Arciniega, and all what he did, not only for CSUB, but the community in Bakersfield. The first thing I noticed when I came to CSUB 22 years ago, how accessible Dr. Arciniega was with the students. It's the first thing I noticed, students just going and talking to him, and they were not intimidated. And that told me something, you know, he really cares, and he's really contributed so much to CSUB. So thank you, Tomas, for remembering all the contributions of the first Chicano president at CSUB. When are we gonna have another one? Or Chicana, Latina? We will wait. Thank you.
Hi, thanks to the panel. This was wonderful. And, you know, of course, so my name is Jose Viagran, and I'm an assistant professor here in ethnic studies. And so, you know, I'm very much, as I'm listening to you, I'm also playing in my mind my syllabus, my course as it's been going, right? And we understand that the racial and ethnic inequality that we have that afflicts Latinx, Latina populations in the United States is a historic one, rooted in hundreds of years of racist laws, you know, being codified into the U.S. Form of government. And so we understand the history of redlining being significant, for example, to the disparities that we face today. This community itself was redlined, and people were specifically excluded through race-restrictive covenants where they could live. We're up against a wall here, right? That we don't get the Fair Housing Act till 1968. We as a community are still suffering from this historic inequality that was embedded into our law. My question for you within that context is, how do we promote the type of activism, the type of social justice, spirit within our classes that can lead us to a seismic shift that is necessary to close these gaps? Because, I'm hearing you, right, Claudia? Ludi's friend has no business. And again, and I love the way Ludi said it, there's nothing wrong with working in the fields. My parents worked in the fields. I worked in the fields. A lot of us did. But you came to college, right, specifically to avoid that, and yet here you are again. And to me, I just see it as a part of the structural inequality we're all inheriting. How do we promote that activism and get that seismic shift going? Because we had something so embedded in our structure that led to this inequality. We need to address this at the structural level. How do we do that?
All my colleagues have a lot of different comments to add, and everything's wonderful. I like to put things always in the historical perspective in terms of the local history. And for the students who just arrived, I would mention to them, you should understand that what you are doing here today is wonderful. You guys represent a whole shift in what's happening in this valley, in the San Joaquin Valley, in terms of education, of all the region. People don't understand that today we're talking about issues for Latino students who have been underserved and under-respected and everything in this valley. But this valley is a tough place. This is also the origin of John Steinbeck's Grapes of Wrath, where the people from Oklahoma came in the 30s from the Dust Bowl era and who came over the mountain and said, look, where we are, we have made it to the big time, we made it to California. They were in Bakersfield, and more specifically in Lamont. Did anybody from Lamont? No Lamont kids? Anyway, people have to understand that Lamont is the center of John Steinbeck's Grapes of Wrath, the Sunset Labor Camp. There's a Sunset Elementary School right next to it. But that kind of oppressive history of all poor people is what this valley has been about forever. And so today we're going to celebrate about the progress that is being made in terms of HSI and Latino students. But it's really for all students. So, for example, the university right now gets Title V money, HSI money, and it comes under the heading Hispanic Serving Institution grants. Well, what people also need to know is that every one of those grants, not one of those grants says this money is to serve Hispanic students only. It's to improve the entire university to serve all students. So that's kind of, I want to emphasize that because it's in this room, all these students here, I'm going to bet money, right? Dollars to donuts, as they say, that almost everyone here is first in their family to go to college. That's just the way CSUB is. It's always been that way, whether it's white students, Black, Latino, whatever. The campus has always been stood out within the Cal State system as having the highest portion of first generation and the highest proportion of students from the local region who depend on this campus. They go to their local campus. As we mentioned, we've been talking about LA, but in LA, they doesn't matter where they live in LA, they'll drive, they'll go to Cal State Long Beach, Dominguez Hills, Cal State. I mean, they don't have the same attachment to their area as we do here. And it's important for them to understand that we have important reason to appreciate the history here and appreciate what it means to make progress. In other words, all of you here are part of the progress of this region. So I just want to emphasize that.
I was going to address the Dr. Villagran's activism question, and I don't know if anybody else wants to address it. I think one of the beauties, of the Chavez Huerta conference that we just had, it was a reminder of the activism in our community, in our own backyard, and the roles our families play. Many of us played in that movement, and I say many of us is because we're still part of that legacy and that history that's here, right? I'm a big believer, and maybe this is my ethnic studies background, but also I think just because of my immigrant background is a lot of things sometimes don't get done quickly because no one is pushing us to, right? And I'm a big believer in using your voice and using the power of your voice. I think students, sometimes we undersell the power that our voice has, and a lot of things don't get done unless students are advocating for it. That's how we got the Dreamers Resource Center. A group of students, UNIRNAR, which is UNIR, which is the United Now for Immigrant Rights student organization, said to Dr. Zalesny when she first came on board, we need a Dreamers Resource Center. And within a year, I was, working with students in that organization, and it got done, and it's been in running for 5 or 6 years. So I think recognizing the power of your voice. I think the other thing, a topic that's not really popular right now, is time, place, manner policy. So that's one of the assignments that I took on. And the reason why I took it on is because I believe in protecting the power of your voice, again, activism. And it has to come from a lens where it's not like, police coming in and breaking things down and whatever gas bombs or whatever it could be, but protecting the freedom of use, freedom of speech, right? And that power that you have, and making sure that your rights are being protected while you're expressing your voice. So that's one of the other duties that I have on that many people don't know, but yeah, that's in the works.
Oh, all right. First, just want to thank the panelists, like really awesome work and information and institutional knowledge that I think I was not privy to. So that was really exciting. Also, let's give it up for the students. Look at them. Look at them on their own accord over here without any sort of push. But my question, I have two different questions. So one, there's, the HSI designation, and we have other designations, right? The ANAPISI, Asian American, Native American, Pacific Islander Serving Institution. We have the HBCUs, the Historically Black Colleges and Universities. So in your opinion, do you see, or what's the role of multiracial coalition building even within those designations, or even if that's a conversation, which I feel like is probably hard, it's at a federal level. And we know that the nature of change in higher education is very slow. But the second question is kind of connected to that is, if you could re-envision some of the institution designations, of an HSI or the other ones, what would that look like other than like money tied to grants in the federal government?
Sure, I can start because I oversee some of that grant money in some shape or form. And I don't know if it was Dr. Martinez or if it was Dr. Flores earlier who mentioned, I think it was Dr. Martinez, that even though we receive money based off of our designation as an HSI, in some cases that money is simply just to benefit the entire university. And so, in a world where we could dictate what the federal government is, doing in a very real sense, which you can do November 5th, actually. But, in terms of the Department of Education and the funding that we receive as an HSI, I think, at least in this moment, those can be directed in a much more targeted sense rather than just for the university in general. But we're not there yet. Not necessarily this institution. I think as a society in the United States, we're not to that point where those discussions are even being had, to be quite honest. Yeah, that's my not so positive response to that question. I'll let other people respond to your first.
If you don't mind, I would like to answer your question directly. I would envision it as an institution that is committed to social justice, making the playing level so that we can serve those who are underprivileged, and so that we can serve those that are in need, so that we can serve all students, regardless of their ethnic background or their status, to be able to be as institution committed to social justice. That will be my ambition, and to have funding and all of these infrastructures like the Institute to be able to engage the community, to engage the students and help the students, and to be able to provide better service to this community.
So we as an institution, so recently the Assembly State passed an Assembly bill that now has a California State designation of a Black Serving Institution that I think Sacramento State just got. So that's something that our current president, Dr. Harper, has committed to doing, is becoming a California Black Serving Institution. The other one that we're now, I believe we're at 7% of what we call ANAPZ enrollment. So the goal is to get a 10% so we can also become an ANAPZ designated university. And I think part of why I think this is important, I think is to, each of them have very specific requirements on how you get these designations, but it's important because it will require a university to really take a look at itself, right? What does this mean? Just because we get these designations, we get this federal funding, it doesn't mean that work stops there. It's what can we do to transform systems, right? And become a socially just institution to better serve the diverse populations that we have. I think it also doesn't necessarily mean we don't care about other populations that are not in those 3 designations. That's not our goal, right? That's not what we do these. It's to really focus on communities that perhaps had not been served historically, and how do we make those changes within the academic setting to make sure that we're serving all of our students.
I think just for the sake of time again, unless there's one question online.
We've got here, let me give you one from online. I know you got them up there too, because we've had a few come in there. So one of the questions online is, well, it says, thank you for the discussion. Earlier it was mentioned job placement after graduation is a major issue for Hispanic or Latinx students. What initiatives is CSUB taking to combat these issues?
So I can speak to the importance of really tying, again, our futures to our economic conditions. And I think that from what my short time here, I think that I've seen that those efforts articulated as part of the Latinx President's Council. In our previous meeting, we had conversations about really recognizing that many students are living paycheck to paycheck, right? Many students have to go back. And, you know, for those of us, especially that are first gen, those of us, there's faculty, right, that we went through college working 2-3 jobs because we were also needing to support our, you know, help out our parents. So that's very real. And I think that this, that when we, faculty like us, first gen, many of us Latinx, but not all, folks of color come to these places, that's at the forefront, right? We're gonna make events and make sure that folks are getting fed. We're gonna make sure that when we're teaching, that we're bringing in community partners, and that's gonna take a long time and a while. But I think that's part of the pedagogical, it's part of the teaching. But I've seen that, and in our council, the Latinx Council, we talked about those partnerships are essential. We need to be able to provide students, right, with those means, right, and not shame students when they're, you know, taking off their hat and working at Trader Joe's or at Starbucks, right? Been there, did it all through grad school, because those are the realities. So we take pride in that, but we also want students to have choices, right? And that's, I think, what's important, because many of us want to go back to our communities. Many of us want to have those businesses. Many of us want to do that. And so I think that's just, again, keeping that in mind, that we don't shame students, right? That we provide pathways at the university. And I do see some of that happening already. But of course, we need to do better.
Okay, I just want to close this by once again thanking my colleagues here for taking the time out of their schedules to talk about this very important question. And if we can give them a round of applause. And thank you all for coming.
And thank you, Dr. Flores, for your work.